Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, and very good morning to everyone. Sorry, I apologize for the link. I just realized before we were about to go on that I didn't provide the link for class. So it was a bit late. Sorry. Give everyone a few minutes here just to get up online. So welcome to week 14, the final week of the semester, our final class. Is anybody out there? Hi, Shazmin. Good morning. All right. So yeah, I won't be surprised if we have a little bit of a smaller class today. Final week of the semester. I'm sure that people are struggling to finish up their assignments, and you're busy with so many things, and you're tired, and all those things that students go through. So I don't plan to keep you the full session today. Just want to finish up the lecture on corporate social responsibility. And that's not a terribly long lecture because it's a lot of examples and stuff. So we'll just finish that one up. But before we do that, I just have a quick activity, another Mentimeter activity based on our discussion from last week. So while people are getting on board here, let me just pull up the Putra Blast. That's my WhatsApp. All right, can you all see the Putra Blast screen?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so go ahead, sign in. Don't forget to sign in. And then just a couple of reminders about important dates. All right, so reminder, your assignment 2 was postponed a week. Okay, so you have now until next Thursday to finish it up. So I hope that extra week helps to do that. And of course, you can just upload that to Putra Blast next Thursday. And then our final exam will be on the 12th, on Monday the 12th. Okay, so it will be, again, as I mentioned last week, it'll be online format like the first time. And I went over the exam content last week. So just if you want, you can go back and relook at that lecture from last week for your preparation for the final. Okay, because I went through all the content in the format last week. All right, so just wanted to remind you of the dates there. Okay, are there any questions or concerns before we begin? Anyone have anything they want to share? So how are you all doing? How is everyone doing? How are you all coping with the semester wrapping up and we're still locked up? And I just want to hear from you guys. How's everyone doing? Anyone want to give a status report? I see a couple of people are trying to speak, but it's muted. So maybe you need to unmute your screens. Anybody want to share? Just want to hear how everyone is doing. Are you coping okay? How are you feeling? No one wants to share? No comments. Okay. Nothing to report. All right. Well, if that's the case, let us begin our class. Okay. So I'm going to put this question up, Mentimeter. Go ahead and you can get out your mobile or whatever, handphone, and then you can. So if you could describe your experience with globalization. So last week's class, we focused on globalization and community development. So if you could describe your experience of globalization in 3 words, what would they be? Okay, so think about your own personal experience based on what we talked about last week. The definition of globalization. Remember, we spoke about the economic elements of it, the cultural and social elements of it, the informational elements of it. Okay, so when you think about globalization based on what we discussed last week, in your own life experience, on an everyday basis, what 3 words come to mind? What 3 words would you use to describe your experience of globalization? See what you can come up with for that question, and then you can post them here on the screen. And we're gonna create a word map from your responses. Well, I'm not gonna do it. Mentimeter is gonna do it. So. You guys all see the Mentimeter screen? Just make sure everyone's looking at the same thing. Sorry?
Yeah, yes, we can see.
You can see it, okay. All right. All right. We've got our first responses. Trade, pollution, and growth. Okay. So this is not, I'm not necessarily asking this from a perspective of like a theoretical perspective. I'm asking in terms of your own experience. Okay, faster, messy. All right, interesting, challenging. Okay. Anyone else? That's only 2 responses. Where's everybody? It says there's 28 people in the class. Are there really 28 people in the class? I'm just wondering now. Maybe I should ask everyone to turn the cameras. Shopee. All right, that's a good answer. Plastic. Okay. Faster. Okay. Cool. Look at that. Amazing. Learning. Okay. Complicated. Yeah. Exploitation. Fast. Empowerment. All right. Interesting. Others. Here we go. Improving. Exciting. Sustainable. Economic. Culture. Expensive. Information. So that's interesting that somebody put expensive. Interesting. Technology. Growth. Happiness. Growth. Okay. That's good. Opportunity. Challenge. Challenging. Exciting. Okay, others? We just got 12 so far. How about the rest of you? Expensive. Okay, a few more minutes for those who have not answered yet. 3 words to describe your experience with globalization. My favorite answer so far is shopping. I'm just kidding. Fast. Depression. The others, just 16 responded so far. We got 31 in the class. So there should be more responses. Who else hasn't responded yet? Sa palagi na share. Okay, well, it doesn't look like anybody else is going to share. Maybe these people are not even in class. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to call on you guys later to see who's actually here. So it's interesting to see the responses. And it seems as though many of you view globalization rather positively. Okay, growth. I mean, technology is just technology. It's not really positive or negative. Of course, this one, expensive. That's clearly not positive. But growth, of course, economic is more descriptive as well. Fast is descriptive, interesting. But some of you I see have things like, oh, more responses coming in. Some of you have things like, where was that other one I saw before? Okay, complicated is one. Pollution, of course. Depression, messy, challenging, competing. All right. So what can we conclude from this little content analysis study that we just did? What do we conclude about how you guys as a group representing young people in Malaysia view globalization? How would you sum up what's here? Anybody want to give it a shot? Who wants to try? Expensive, difficult. Exploitation. Anybody? So I guess Hadi's not in class today because Hadi would be the first one to answer my question. Siapa? Siapa nak? Cuba. How would you sum up if you had to write a report on this? The question was, how do students in DCE 3411 describe globalization? Anyone? Alia? Want to try, Alia? Oh, Hadi is here. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on, why there's no response, but it looks as though okay, never mind. All right, so we will never mind, we'll just continue with the lecture since there's no response. Okay, so sorry, 1 second, I have to get my thank you, Farhana, for your response. It's okay. Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer that because the responses are varied. Okay, the responses are really varied. If you look at the responses, there's a variety of responses, and I think it's safe to say that if we take you guys as a sample, it really depicts the level of complexity of globalization. Okay, here's Bahira. Bahira, it's a process of growing or expanding. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. That's for sure. Growth is one of the major terms that was mentioned. Okay, but clearly, if you look at the bigger words, so the word cloud, the way the word cloud works is that the bigger words indicate the number of times that people have, so the bigger the word, the more responses that you guys gave for that word. So clearly globalization is affiliated or is related to technology, right? So young people see globalization as very much linked to technology. Okay, it's also linked to economics, right? It has the connotation of growth, right? Young people find it interesting, right? It's also related to speed, doing things fast, and it's also perceived as being expensive. So maybe there's the economic influence of it. It means that things are more expensive because of globalization. Okay, and then there's a variety of other terms used here, some positive, some negative, right? So things like pollution and depression and challenging and messy, of course, those are the negative ways that people view globalization, but there's also a lot of positives here as well. So learning, interesting, information sharing, or information improving. Okay, so and I think that's very accurate. I think most people would probably agree. I think there is no clear-cut answer to that question about globalization. There are certain positives related to globalization, but there are definitely also negatives, what we call externalities of globalization. All right, so I think your answers captured it very well. Captured the way that most people view globalization. Right. And yes, you're right. It's very much driven by technology and by economics. Okay, so I think you captured that accurately. Right. So again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's I just want to know how you felt, how you experienced, uh, how you would describe your experience. Okay, so all right, thanks. That's just an icebreaker just to get us going. So let's just move on to our lecture for today. So I have the sense that you guys have a lot to do. Okay, so today's topic is on corporate social responsibility. And in terms of community development, corporate social responsibility, it can play a big role, especially in certain communities. Certain communities, they get a lot of benefit from the role of corporations in those communities. Okay, so you do have significant role by corporations in many communities, although not all, of course. So if we look at the definition of CSR, it classically, it was defined, or traditionally was defined just as philanthropy. Okay, and what is philanthropy? Does anybody know what philanthropy means? What does the word philanthropy mean? This word here. Anybody tell me the definition of philanthropy?
Prof.
Yeah, Adi.
Yeah, I think usually the philanthropy term usually is used in science, right? Or
Used in
Hana said generosity.
yeah, Farhana said generosity. Yeah,
Kind of.
yeah. So yeah, it's usually right. Desire to promote welfare, charity. Okay, charity is also a form of philanthropy. So yeah, that desire to do good, that desire to be generous, to give back. That's essentially philanthropy, and it's synonymous usually with charity. All right, so giving sadaqah is an example. Okay, so classically CSR was synonymous with that. All right, but then it shifted to the emphasis on the role business. Okay, so business relations. Okay, so particularly the contribution that corporations or firms provide for solving social problems. Okay, and so a lot of people may not be aware of the role that a lot of businesses play in addressing social problems in societies. Okay, so of course we think of businesses, big corporations, as they're just out to make money, which they are, but at the same time, many of them do take on play more of a social role. They have their foundations or they have their CSR branches that try to get involved in helping out the communities where they work, right? The communities that benefit their businesses and so forth. All right. So modern CSR, also referred to as corporate citizenship, responsible business practices, etc., is whereby business organizations consider the interests of society, okay, by taking responsibility for the impact of their activities on, as you can see there on the slide, customers, suppliers, employees, shareholders, communities, and other stakeholders, as well as the environment. Okay, so CSR has really grown. The idea, the concept of it has grown away from just giving charity and philanthropy to playing more of a responsible role in society. Okay, now, whether corporations actually do this is, again, it's debatable. It's kind of like globalization. We're not really sure to what extent. Some will say, yes, corporations are very important, play a very big role. Others will say, no, a lot of it is just promotion, PR. They want to make themselves look good. And so, again, it's one of those debatable kind of things. It depends on who you ask, or it depends on the corporation you're talking about. Okay, so that's the reality of CSR. Okay, so in this model, in the Vassar model, sorry, I have to move the Visser's CSR model, and this is a model that's specifically related to developing countries. There are other models that are more suited for developed countries, but this one is more suited for developing countries. And you can see there at the bottom, the model has 4 types of CSR. So there's really 4 types of social responsibility that corporations engage in. Okay, and the bottom, the bottom of the pyramid, bottom level, the basement, the foundation is economic responsibilities. Okay, so obviously they provide investment, and we talked about globalization and how companies invest in countries, right? We talked about direct foreign investment and why the government wants companies to invest in their countries, right? I'm sure you guys remember that. Well, by doing that, of course, they create jobs, and in some cases they pay taxes, not always, but they pay taxes as well. So they provide that economic responsibility, and a lot of it is in providing jobs for people. Okay, so that very first social responsibility that they play is to provide jobs. Okay, and there's really no better social program out there than a good job. right? A good job, people can provide for themselves, provide for their families, and meet their daily needs, etc. Okay, so economic responsibilities is the first and foremost. And then there's philanthropic responsibility. So the corporations will often set aside funds for social and community projects. Okay, we're going to look at some examples in a minute on some of those. But then it doesn't stop there. A lot of people think CSR is just about that. It's just about, giving money and then providing projects. Okay, but that's not it. If you look at this model, and this is more of the modern idea of CSR, it goes beyond that. It includes legal and ethical responsibilities. Okay, so legal responsibilities, number one, they have to obey the law. Okay, corporations have to have good relations with government officials, but they also have to obey the laws of the countries that they're working in. Okay, so these multinational corporations that we spoke about last week that have really been the driving force behind globalization. So, for example, Nestle Corporation, when it goes to set up a factory in the US, it has to abide by the laws of the US. Now, those laws may be different than if it tries to go and set up a factory in Negeri Sembilan, Malaysia. Okay, so if you go to the Nestle factory in Negeri Sembilan, Malaysia, they have to abide by the laws of Malaysia as well as the state Negeri Sembilan. Okay, and so to do that, they have to maintain good relationship with the governments. Okay, so they have their legal responsibilities. They cannot just do whatever they want. Okay, now at the top of the pyramid is the ethical responsibilities. So even going beyond, above and beyond their legal requirements, what they have to, the laws they have to follow, there's an ethical responsibility at even a higher level than that. All right, so they are expected to be good ethical organizations. All right, so they're supposed to adopt voluntary codes of governance and ethics. So they should abide by the ethical norms of the societies that they're working in or the communities that they're working in, right? And so these might include certain practices that are not necessarily dictated by law. In other words, they're not wajib, as we would say in Malaysia. They're not wajib, but they are sort of expected. They're sort of, maybe they have to do with certain employment policies, employee policies. So, for example, you're a big multinational corporation and you want to hire a bunch of young people as interns. All right. So you want to hire, like maybe some of you are going to go for your internships in the coming semesters, and you're going to work for some of these corporations. Well, a lot of corporations, they provide internships for young people that are not paid. Okay. But if they're doing business in a developing country where people have a hard time meeting ends meet, for example, maybe the more ethical thing to do is to provide a stipend for young people, right? So pay them 500 ringgit a month, 1,000 ringgit a month as a stipend that will help them at least meet their transportation costs, their daily expenses, etc. Okay, so there's no law that says that the corporation has to provide a stipend for its interns. But ethically speaking, they may choose to do so, okay? Given the situation they're in, given the community that they're working in and the needs of the people that they're serving. Okay, so this would be a higher level of ethical responsibility beyond just the legal requirements. Okay, and so that's the Visser's CSR model. These are the 4 types of social responsibility. So CSR is not just charity or philanthropy. Okay, it's not just charity. It's not just providing jobs. It goes beyond that, actually. Okay, so that's just important to know. All right. So in terms of economic responsibilities, all right, there are several. And here we see some of them. Okay, so responsibility to provide their investors with adequate and attractive returns on their investment. So they have a responsibility to provide the best possible returns that they can for those who invest in them. So if you invest in a company, it is an economic responsibility of the corporation to provide a good return as best they can. Okay, and that is why people invest in companies. Right? They want that economic return. It's their responsibility to be profitable as best they can. Okay. Now, of course, they have to do that within within the bounds of the law. They cannot break the law to do that. And then, of course, they should be ethical beyond, like we just mentioned, beyond just the legal requirements. They should be ethical as well. But they have an economic responsibility to be profitable because they're private companies. These are Sindarian Berhad organizations. So they're private companies. So they're out to make money. And so for those that invest in them, they should be making profits. Maximize sales, minimize their costs. Again, that's how they become profitable. Make sound strategic decisions. Okay, so when you or I invest in a company, we expect that the company directors, the management is going to make sound business decisions. Okay. And they should be attentive to their policies. Okay, so if they have certain policies in regards to paying out dividends, okay, does everybody know what a dividend is when it comes to a private investment? Who can tell me what a dividend is? Either tell or write in the chat box. What is a dividend? They always talk about dividends when it comes like the end of the year, and they talk about the EPF, right? KWSP is paying a dividend of 6% this year. So what does that mean? Siapa tahu? Distribution of profits, yes. Rewards, yes. Yeah, Bahira, you got it. Yep, the benefits. Right, exactly. The amount that the company pays to its shareholders, right? So it's, yeah, exactly. Distribution of profits. So at the end of the year, if the company makes 10 million ringgit in profits, and it's got 10,000 investors, it has to share that those profits with the investors, the shareholders, because these are the ones in a public company. At least these are the ones that actually own the company. It's the shareholders. Okay, so those that make investments in the company and they get their money back, they get a return on their investment, which is also known as a dividend. Okay, so there's policies that go along with that, and each company has its own policies on that. So they have to abide by those policies. All right. And whatever those policies are, and they'll be different for each company. You know, what percentage they pay, you know, the formula for determining the percentage, all that. So those are policies. So they have to abide by those policies. Okay, so those are the economic responsibilities. In terms of the legal responsibilities, of course, they have several. They have to obey all the laws, of course, obviously, and adhere to all the regulations. Okay. What kind of regulations? Who can tell me what would be an example of a corporate a regulation that a company has to abide by? How about regulation? What's the meaning of that? Can anybody give an example or give their definition? What is meant by regulation? Anybody know? Nobody knows? Okay, the Company Act. All right, so that's a law. Yeah, any act is a law. And then within the act, yeah, a rule or directive made and attained by authority. Okay, so you're looking at the definition on the formal definition. Okay, good, Farhana. So you have different authorities that govern, yeah, SOPs, right? So you have different authorities that govern different aspects of corporate life. For example, there's the environmental, under the Ministry of the Environment, you have different agencies that set out regulations for certain things. So for example, like if you have a factory that builds cars, like Proton Factory, okay, for a company that, there's certain regulations they have to abide by the government. So for example, they cannot pollute the rivers. All right. So if the factory happens to be near a waterway, near like a river or something, the regulations state that they cannot dump this into the river, that into the river. Okay, so there's explicit regulations about how they can buang their sampah, get rid of their waste products and so forth. Okay, this is all regulated by the government. Okay, so they have to abide by all those regulations. So for environmental, there's a lot of regulations. All right, and of course we know from reading the news and the social media that there's a lot of problems with following these environmental regulations. We hear all the time about companies that are polluting the rivers and they're polluting in different ways. And so they're not abiding by the regulations, right? And so this is always in the news because it's often a lot cheaper, right? They save a lot of money. If they can just dump their waste product into the river rather than disposing it the way it's supposed to be according to regulations, they save a lot of money, they save a lot of time, etc. So some unethical companies will do that to save money. They have to fulfill all their contractual obligations and honor warranties and guarantees. Okay, so if they make any contracts, for example, with their vendors or whatever, they have to abide by all those contracts. Okay, so any contract obligations they have, right? There are labor laws. Okay, so the third one, laws of protecting employees. These are the labor laws that fall under the Ministry of Human Resource. Okay, so under the Ministry of Human Resources, we have many laws that are set out to protect employees from abuses of different types. Okay, so for example, the number of hours in a day that people can legally work, even though that with work from home and COVID-19, that kind of went out the window, right? Because people are pretty much working 24/7 nowadays. All right, but there are actually laws that state you cannot overwork employees, you cannot abuse employees and stuff like that. There's the minimum wage laws. Okay, minimum wage laws, that's another legal responsibility. Companies have to provide that minimum wage for their employees. So there are a variety of labor laws, okay, that protect employees. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there's environmental laws. All right, so there's a whole host of environmental laws, and these are increasing all the time because people are becoming more and more aware of the environmental concerns. So there are more laws now regarding what companies can and cannot do in terms of the environment. Okay, so how they interact with the environment. Okay, so in Malaysia, we have a lot of issues with the environment. We have Malaysia has a beautiful environmental ecosystem. The rainforests, for example, the waterways, the beaches and the ocean. So these are really important resources for Malaysia, both from a perspective of tourism, as well as products that we get from the ecology in the country. So the environmental laws in Malaysia are very important. They're very important. And so it's really, we need to pay attention actually to see which corporations, which companies that work in Malaysia are actually taking care of Malaysia. They have that sense of social responsibility, the sense of legal responsibility. They're fulfilling the laws, they're obeying the regulations, right? They are doing things to protect the environment, doing things to protect the people, right? So we should, as consumers that buy these products, we should be aware and we should be interested in what corporations do, how they behave in this country that we live in, okay, Malaysia. It's very important. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there's the ethical responsibilities. So going beyond the legal responsibilities, doing what is right and avoiding or minimizing harm to I don't know why it says take there. Sorry, it should just say to shareholders. Okay, so going beyond just the legal, the sort of right or wrong from a legal perspective is, again, sort of looking at the normative behaviors. And here, what we can see from the Malaysian perspective is there's a lot in regards to things that corporations need to pay attention to in regard to like cultural sensitivities, for example. All right, so if a company wants to promote some kind of service or product, they need to take into account the multiracial and multi-cultural aspect of the country. So they don't want to make any promotions that are going to be offensive to any particular groups, right? Or any particular religions, so stuff like that. That's more around, that's more in the area of ethics, more so than, the legality. It's more ethics. Doing what is considered normatively right and wrong, right, in the country. What the general public feels is right or wrong. Okay, not necessarily what's legally right or wrong. Nabila, you mentioned here animal testing. Yes, that's a very good example. Now, I don't know what the Malaysian laws are in terms of animal testing. Okay, maybe Malaysia has laws in regards to animal testing, but that can also be definitely an ethical issue, right? So corporations that do animal testing, for example, they test their medicines. So for pharmaceutical companies, they test different types of medicines and treatments on animals. And then different types of testing is done for different types of products. Okay, so there may be laws on that. And if not, what are the sort of ethical norms? Okay. And that one also we see can be different according to region. Like Western countries tend to be very, when it comes to a lot of these ethical issues, they tend to be a bit more conscious of them, I think, at least the ones in relation to like animal testing, for example. It's more of an issue in those countries, but I think it's also gaining interest here as well. Avoiding questionable practices. Okay, so if something is deemed, maybe it's not clearly wrong, but it's something that people are kind of questioning, best to avoid it. Okay, so companies that are sensitive to those kind of things, they will avoid those kinds of practices. Asserting ethical leadership, so setting an example of ethical leadership is really important. Okay, so leaders that set a good example in terms of ethics is important, and that's a form of CSR. That's a form of corporate social responsibility when we see ethical leaders doing things. Okay. In fact, I showed a video. I saw a video yesterday of this president. He's the former president of the country of Uruguay. I don't know if you've seen the video of him. Very interesting man. Then maybe I'll show it. It's just a couple minutes. Maybe I'll show it in a little while about what ethical leadership looks like. Okay, a good example. Assume there is a floor on behavior operating above minimum required. Okay, so going above and beyond what is just expected, the sort of ordinary behavior, going above and beyond that is kind of the idea here for ethical responsibility. And then philanthropic responsibility, contributing financial and human resources. Okay, so that's the philanthropy. That's the projects, the programs for the community. Okay, that's money, donations for scholarships and other things. That's the financial contribution to the community. Improving quality of life, so providing different services that help improve quality of life, maybe giving out free materials or free products to people. Nestle's sponsoring an event and they're giving out free Milo or something, so that would be an example of that. And then providing programs, it could be health programs, education programs, etc., arts programs. And so like, especially if you go to a lot of arts programs, culture and arts programs, you'll see that they're often sponsored by corporations. So if you go to the National Theater, for example, and you take in a show, some kind of play or musical or something, a production, an arts production, they're often sponsored by corporations. And this is philanthropic CSR. Okay, an example of philanthropic CSR. Okay. And then, of course, just promoting and engaging in volunteerism. So often, even when there's things like natural disasters, flood relief, those kind of things, corporations will also help to get volunteers. They may even give donations and stuff like that. All right. So this is one of the ways that corporations do CSR, a lot of philanthropic giving. And that's typically what people think of when they think of CSR, is this type of activity or these types of activities. Okay, this is kind of the traditional idea of CSR. So the drivers, the drivers of CSR in developing countries, specifically, even though Malaysia is not really considered a developing country anymore, we're more like a middle income country, which is not really developing. So we're sort of not really, well, I mean, we are and we're not. Okay, so we're sort of in between, but we don't really fit the definition of a true developing country anymore. Okay, but in the case of developing countries, you can see here, there's the external drivers of CSR and the internal drivers. Okay, so we start at the bottom, the external drivers, you have international standardization. So doing things according to international standards, right? So Nestle in Sweden does things this way. And so they've standardized what they do. So in every country, Nestle has these types of CSR programs. Okay, so they've standardized their CSR practices. There's investment incentives. So the incentive to invest can also be related to CSR. Okay. Stakeholder activism. So stakeholders in the company can also drive CSR. They can require or request that the company does CSR. All right. And then supply chain. Different levels of the supply chain, there may be a need or a call for doing CSR. And then internally, you have within the country, there are cultural traditions, all right, that might drive. So for example, you have it's Hari Raya season in Malaysia, right? So, companies want to do CSR activities like buka puasa or sponsor orphanage or something like that. So there's these internal drivers within the country. Political reform can also be a driver of CSR. Socioeconomic priorities. All right. So depending on the needs of the population, of the people. All right. So now, for example, COVID-19, we have a lot of socioeconomic need. A lot of people lost their jobs, lost their incomes. So companies that do have resources are going to do more CSR in times like this. Governance gaps. So in some countries, especially developing countries, government just doesn't have the funds to do that. To provide for everybody. They just don't have the funds if they're a poorer country. So the corporations will often step in and provide assistance where governments cannot, right? So they may offer programs like community health programs, even though the government should be doing it. The government doesn't have the resources to do it. So the corporations come in and help out and step in. So same thing with crisis response, and then market access. So because corporations can access markets, it also often gives them the opportunity to do CSR because of their access to different markets. Oh, Farhana wrote me a message here. So I want to share my opinion on calling an approach about 150 companies in Malaysia, ask about covering on this one. Sorry, our company don't sponsor people right now. Oh, interesting. Okay, Farhana, if I could just share your experience. So Farhana said she has, in the past 2 years, she was calling or approaching more than 50 companies in Malaysia asking about crowdfunding and sponsoring for a Camp Bina Jati Diri program. But the response that she received was mostly, sorry, our company does not sponsor people right now. Interesting. So I think my approach is not appropriate. So they don't treat me very well. So I want to know, what is the process to approach the company for CSR? Excellent question. Before I try to answer that question, does anybody in the class have any suggestion for Farhana? How can Farhana improve her chances of getting CSR for her program? Camp Bina Jati Diri. Now remember, this is COVID-19 time, right? So last 2 years, you're talking about we're in a very difficult situation. Economically, it's a very difficult situation. Many companies are not doing well, right? Because of the economics of what's happening with COVID-19. So what might be some of the strategies that Farhana can use?
Prof, can you hear me, Prof?
Yeah.
Alright, okay. For me, I think in my opinion, what can Fana do to maybe help her in finding, what you call it?
Yeah, sponsorship
On
or
sponsorship, yeah. Basically, I think what can she do is that maybe Fana can sebab lah. Sebab before this, she said that she tried to ask from 50 companies, right? So maybe after this, if she want to continue with the process, Fana can maybe focus on some companies, basically companies that is focused on giving CSR. Sometimes like
yeah.
every company that focus in giving
Okay.
is kind of help, right? So maybe by focusing on a company that gives CSR more, maybe she
Okay.
will gain us something from it. Okay, I think
Yeah.
that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Hadi. Good suggestion. So first, looking at and doing a little bit of research to see which companies do tend to give CSR, or at least recently have given CSR, especially in the area that you're looking at, the type of programs that the type of program that you're trying to get sponsorship for. Because corporations, they tend to have CSR priorities. In other words, certain companies like to fund certain types of programs because they usually have like an officer in the company that's responsible for doing CSR, right? And based on that, companies, based on their priorities, they will usually have some kind of criteria for what kind of programs they like to do CSR for, right? So maybe Nestle has a CSR strategic plan, and for the next 2 or 3 years, Nestle is going to do CSR on these 3 issues, like sports development and, poverty alleviation and whatever, who knows? Okay. So if you could do some homework first, maybe do some research first to look at and see which companies are doing CSR in the area that you're trying to get sponsorship for, that might help. Okay, that might help. Okay, and then Shara Shazwani says here shows that when what the company can get, when provide sponsorship benefit like your marketing. So yeah, of course, you always want to. I mean, let's face it, CSR for corporations is also it is for self-promotion. They do use it as a form of self-promotion, and so whatever way that you can show that this is going to benefit them will, of course, always help. It always helps to show what benefit they get from it. Okay, so that is another. Maybe you did that. I don't know, Farhana. Maybe you tried that. But that is always an important thing to consider. So, but I think those are 2 really important strategies, things to consider. So, I mean, it's for corporations that they're always looking for mileage. These things it's about mileage. What is going to help promote the image of the company? So you may want to focus on promotion, like how much promotion your program is going to get that company, right? And who, right? Because they also have target groups. They also target certain groups. So if you can identify their target groups and then say, look, this program that we're asking you to sponsor is going to be, it's going to be taken up by so many people from your target group, and it's going to be a great opportunity for you to get, positive PR, public relations, mileage, and so forth, So you kind of have to sell it to them. All right. I think that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind. Okay, Farhana? I don't know if that helps. I'm in class. Sorry, excuse me 1 second. Okay. My daughter Nadia would like to show her artwork to the class. Art break. We're taking a little art break. Nice. Okay, so they liked it. Okay. Thank you. That was the most interesting thing that's happened in the class so far. Okay. What time is it anyway? Oh, it's almost 12. Okay, a few more minutes and we'll take a break. Thank you, guys. All right, so thank you, Tree. Yeah, online learning for 6-year-olds is so much more fun than for older older people. They do so many more fun things than we do. Okay. So let me just 2 more slides and we'll take a break. I just want to get through this because after the break, it's just going to be examples mostly. I look at examples of different types of CSR programs. Okay, so here we look at the rationale of focusing on CSR in the developing world as opposed to developed countries. Okay, and there is a difference according to the UN, or according to some of the UN and some of the other international agencies. So developing countries represent the most rapidly expanding economies mostly, and hence the most lucrative growth markets for business. All right. So when corporations are working in those countries, of course, they know that those countries are the most rapidly developing. They know that business opportunities are going to be very potentially rich. And if they can capture those markets, they have the chance to make a lot of money. So they really want to position themselves in those countries as being seen in a positive way so that people will support and patronize their services and their products. All right. And it's really about market share. They want to get as much of the market that they can in those countries. Developing countries are also where the social and environmental crises are usually most acutely felt in the world. Okay, so it's in developing countries that have the biggest problems in terms of social and environmental issues. So poverty, and then of course the variety of environmental issues, pollution and so forth, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for companies to do CSR. There's a lot that they can do. And the more that they do, of course, the better it makes them look, the better the reputation of the company, and the more people that will want to buy their products and support them and allow them to do business. Okay, so there's a huge potential payoff for corporations to do CSR in developing countries. Okay, and there's also just less competition. There's less people, other companies that they have to do business, that they have to compete with. Against, as opposed to developed countries. In terms of drivers, so developing countries are where globalization, economic growth, investment, business activity are likely to have the most dramatic social environmental impacts. Okay, so because they have the biggest crises, they have the most potential, right? And so companies can make and have a big impact. However, developing countries present a set of unique challenges, okay, which are collectively quite different to those faced in the developed world. All right. So developing countries there's a lot of challenges to doing CSR. All right. So for example, corruption. We know that in developing countries, corruption is much worse than it is in more of the developed countries. And so that presents certain challenges. On the one hand, a corporation might want to do certain types of CSR projects, but in order to do that, they have to maybe bribe certain officials, to get access or to get permission to do those things. So that makes it very difficult because on the one hand, they're trying to do something like a charitable project or program or a health program. And on the other hand, in order to do it, they have to, engage in Raswa to be allowed to do it, stuff like that. There's a lot of those kinds of contradictions that occur that exist in developing countries that they have to work through. The other thing in developing countries, a lot of them don't have the infrastructure, right, that developed countries do. So to do business, it's harder. And in fact, I was speaking with an engineer who was doing a program it was either Afghanistan or in, which country was it? I think it was Afghanistan, or was it Bangladesh? I forget. one of the low-income countries, and so this they want. Oh, it was actually in India. It was in a very rural area of India, and they wanted to set up a factory. But in that particular area of India, there was no electricity, there was no infrastructure, basically. So the government told them, for them, if they wanted to do business in that state, they have to bring their own electricity supply, their own water supply. They have to basically make their own roads to get there, right? So and in return, they wouldn't have to pay taxes or something. But the company had to bring its own infrastructure basically with it in order to do business in that country. So these are some of the challenges that companies face in doing CSR and doing business, for that matter, in the developing world. Okay, so it's a lot harder. But as I said, the payoff can be potentially greater, much greater, especially if they can establish a long-term presence. Like you look at the presence of Nestle in Malaysia. Nestle's been here for so many years, and you look at we talked about this last week of how Nestle is a household name. So many of their products are household names in Malaysia. And they also do a lot of CSR, of course, in Malaysia as well. They do a lot of sponsorship and stuff like that. Again, there's a great payoff. Okay, so after this slide, we'll take a break. The roles of CSR in community development: to share negative experiences, to share the negative consequences as a result of industrialization. All right. Closer ties between corporations and community. They help to get talents. So for example, they bring in workers from other parts of the world that bring certain skills and talents that then get passed on to people in the community. Okay, so there's that talent transfer. All right, and they transfer technology as well, right? So they transfer technology and they transfer knowledge, they transfer know-how through the way that they bring in talent. Now they transfer technology. So, for example, Microsoft is going to set up all these new data centers. It was a big catch by the government, the big victory, because Microsoft is going to invest a lot of money in Malaysia to set up these data centers, and of course, by doing that, they're going to transfer a lot of technology to the local business community, right? So Malaysians working for Microsoft here are going to learn about all these high-end technologies, and so therefore that technology is going to get transferred to the local economy. Okay, so there's that role in community development as well. So they help to develop communities that way. And then CSR also helps to protect the environment. So a lot of environmental programs, and that also helps to develop the community as well by engaging in environmental protection. All right. Now, the first one there, I want to go back to that one, to share the negative consequences as a result of industrialization. That is not necessarily a benefit, okay? So because oftentimes with industrialization factories and stuff, there's, like we mentioned, pollution and stuff like that, there are these negative consequences, all right? So in CSR, the CSR is actually to undo the effects of those consequences. All right, I'm not quite sure why it says share the negative consequences. I have to go back and revise that slide. I think that's a mistake. It's not about sharing the negative consequences. It's about addressing really the negative consequences as a result. Okay, so CSR programs will often try to undo the negative consequences, right? So for example, if people are working excessive hours, right? So the CSR program, again, we talked about the legal and ethical aspects of CSR. So maybe as a CSR program, they will institute, 8-hour work days or something to maintain limits on the amount that people work. Okay, so that's a way of undoing the negative consequences of industrialization. All right, so I will go back and edit that slide. Okay, any questions? Any questions about CSR? Farhana, thank you for sharing your experience. I hope that our responses were helpful, although it's really not an easy question. It's not an easy problem to solve, given the current situation with the economy. As you guys may know, we are the department GDPL is having our AHRD conference in November, and we're trying to get sponsorship for our conference, and it's also very challenging. It's very challenging now to get sponsorship of any kind, given the situation with COVID-19. Okay, so if there's no questions, let's just take a quick break. Take about a 10-minute break, and we'll come back. All right.
All right, Prof. Thank you.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So let's get started again, and we should be finishing up fairly soon. So let you go a bit early today, since this is our last week of class. So I'll just continue. If people aren't here back yet, they can join when they come back. So the skills needed by CSR managers and communities. So for those who are actually working in CSR, maybe you are, and maybe some of you, when you go for your internships next year, inshallah, you may be working in the CSR departments or the CSR offices of your respective companies. And so these are some of the skills that have been highlighted by scholars in terms of what does it take to be in CSR or to lead CSR projects. So you can see the business skills, all right, a variety of business skills. Of course, these are similar business skills that you would find working in the corporation itself, but of course, there's more in relation to perhaps things like problem solving, things like community relations, communication is a very important one, and stuff like that. Because you have to, of course, engage with communities. You're often involved in altruism and volunteerism, and stuff like that. So you can see the people skills there are very much community driven, and even things like political awareness. Why might political awareness be important for being a CSR manager? Can anybody take a guess? Who would like to share? Why would political awareness be important for a CSR manager? Anybody? Maybe you're not back yet. Did I start too early? Political awareness. I mean, CSR is mostly about giving back and philanthropy and so forth, ethics. Why would political awareness be important? Can anybody tell me? Okay, maybe you're not back yet. So political awareness is important because if you're doing work in communities, you have to understand the political dynamics of those communities. We talked about throughout the semester in community development, the interaction with stakeholders can often be very political. There's political dynamics within every community. And so this also goes with CSR because CSR companies are bringing in resources to communities through CSR often. And so anytime resources are being transferred, there's going to be sort of political fallout from that, right? So you have to be aware of the political dynamics that are going on in communities. Okay, so who has the power, who wants the power, where are the power struggles, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so political awareness is actually really important for those engaged in CSR. Okay, because anytime you're coming with resources, there's going to be political ramifications of that. And so you have to know what the political dynamics are. And of course, the variety of technical skills often that are needed as well, including things like understanding, human rights issues and stuff like that. Understanding sustainability, right? Especially when it comes to environmental sustainability and so forth. Okay, so it's beyond the normal or the sort of typical business skills that corporations often deal with. When it comes to CSR, there's a whole nother level of skill that is required that has more to do with sensitivities and working with people and understanding the nuances of how communities work and stuff like that. All right, so there's that added layer that you have to understand about when it comes to CSR. Okay, So just to rehash the different types, so responsibility towards society, responsibility towards government, responsibility towards employees, responsibility towards shareholders, and responsibility towards consumers. These are the different types of social responsibility. So on this last part here, I'm going to present you with some examples according to each of these different types of responsibility. So responsibility towards society, okay, carrying on business with moral and ethical standards, as we mentioned, prevention of environmental pollution, minimizing ecological imbalance, contributing towards the development of social health and education, and making use of appropriate technology. Okay, so these are all the different ways, and we've sort of already discussed these. I just want to, this is more of just a summary according to the different types and some examples here. So McDonald's, for example, if as an example of contributing back to society, or sorry, responsibility to society. All right. And this is more of an environmental, along the lines of environmental CSR. Okay. So McDonald's restaurants recycle waste materials, including use cooking oil, and they use cardboard and paper. If you notice, if you go and eat at McDonald's, you notice that when you get their takeaway, their materials tend to be mostly paper, right? They don't use, they use very little plastic now. And of course, that's supposed to be more environmentally friendly. Okay, and you can see in the picture there, their trucks, some of their trucks even run on biodiesel made from their recycled cooking oil. Okay, so that's very interesting. I think that's very interesting that they do that. I don't know if they do that in Malaysia. This may be that part. The biodiesel may be only in other countries. I'm not sure if they're doing that in Malaysia. Okay, so this is one example. KFC, two of our favorite American fast food companies. Another one is KFC and their water conservation project. They've implemented projects that have saved over 800 million gallons of water across the globe. Okay, so they have high efficiency irrigation systems, low flow hand sinks, and have optimized restroom fixtures. And this is standard components in their stores. Okay, so they are globally, and of course, KFC is a huge company that owns restaurants all over the world. Okay, so they're doing this in all their restaurants. That means that they're saving, or at least trying to save a lot of water. Okay. And so this is another example. It's environmental, but it's also, because it is environmental, it is directly related to, societal well-being. Okay. And in many countries, especially if their stores are in like the Middle East, the desert regions, that are much drier. I mean, in Malaysia, usually we're blessed with, tons of water. We have lots of rain. And so we're a tropical country. So we don't have the kinds of issues with water that other countries do. All right. So this may not seem like a big deal in Malaysia, but in many countries, it is a very big deal. Okay. Canon is another one. So Canon has this scholarship program. Okay. So this is also a contribution to society, a CSR program that's educational in nature. All right. So it's been around since 1996. And it's a scholarship program for young Malaysians to achieve their bachelor's degrees. Okay, so this is a very popular form of CSR, which is the form of scholarships, educational scholarships. So you find many companies that do this. Okay. And so green technology, as we know, has all these aspects. So one of the major ways nowadays, as we mentioned earlier, that companies give back to society is through green technology or environmentally friendly technology. All right. So responsibility towards government, as we mentioned, along the lines of the legal and ethical requirements that go along with CSR. So obeying the rules and regulations, paying of taxes, cooperating with government to promote social values. Okay, not going against the government's ideas of social values, not to take advantage of loopholes in business laws, and cooperating with the government for economic growth and development. Okay, so these are the ways that companies, there's responsibilities they have towards the governments where they do their business. Okay, so here's an example of the MRCB, Malaysian Resources Corporation, okay, championing education for the less fortunate. So strong supporter, MRCB, sorry, is a strong supporter of Yayasan, promoting intelligence, nurturing talents, advocating responsibility program. Pintor helps underprivileged children in primary schools improve their academic performance by reaching out through school reward incentives, motivation, and team building activities. Okay, so this is another educational CSR, not directly linked to the responsibility to government per se, not directly linked to obeying the laws and stuff like that. This is more of another program, more of a philanthropic program. Okay. And these are just examples of different types of CSR. I'm not necessarily organizing them according to the type, but they're just examples of different types of CSR programs. All right, so that's another educational one. School adoption program. As you can see, many of them are educational. So Petronas has a school adoption program, provides tuition classes in English, math, and science. Okay, and of course, that's related to their work. So they're in a petroleum company, and so much of their work is along the lines of science, right? Scientific types of engineering and so forth. So they're promoting that through these tuition classes for English, math, and science. All right, conducted by dedicated teachers and assisted by Petronas staff. All right, and so they have their own learning approach and help young people, especially children, to reach their potential in the areas of English, math, and science. All right. Responsibility towards shareholders, as we mentioned the responsibilities that they have towards their shareholders, the people that essentially own the companies, especially if they're public companies, to ensure a reasonable rate of return, to work for the survival and the growth of the company, not concern. Why does it say concern? To build reputation and goodwill of the company and not to take advantage of loopholes in business laws, and to remain transparent and accountable. Okay. So this picture here is very telling, actually, this one here, because this is really what a lot of companies have to balance. You can see the idea of the balance, the scale here. The needs, the interests of the customers with the interests of the shareholders. Okay, because of course they're trying to sell their products to customers, but they're trying to meet the demands of the shareholders. Okay, so the shareholders expect profits and they expect money, and of course they also expect the company to be ethical and follow the laws. Right, so they have to meet those needs, and then of course customers, they have to provide good products at a good price, so customers will be satisfied with the company. And so they're often balancing the needs and interests of these two groups. All right, and so they have to think of the shareholders when they are doing their engaging in CSR. That's part of their work. So here's an example: basic policy for shareholder returns. Okay, so this is sort of a statement about their shareholder CSR. All right, so Casio considers the maintenance and expansion of returns for all of its shareholders an important management issue and constantly strives to improve its business performance and financial structure. Okay, so remember we said that their CSR is to ensure to the shareholders that they're going to do everything they can to maintain their profits, to increase their profits, right, et cetera, to be strategic and all that. The company's dividend policy calls for maintaining stable dividends. In other words, not too much fluctuation, so it's consistent. So people can sort of expect a certain rate of return every year. It's not going to fluctuate so much, right? So that's the company's policy has to do that, right? They have to try to ensure that for their shareholders. And Casio determines the allocation of profit by taking into account all factors, such as profit levels, financial position, dividend payout ratio, and future business development and forecasts, okay? So the company has to balance all these different things here to ensure that they are fulfilling the dividend policy and they are maintaining strong, robust business performance. Okay. And so this is the need for this. So if I'm a shareholder in Casio, I want to make sure that my company is doing everything it can to improve its business position, its finances, etc. Okay, and so this is done through these types of policies, and this is actually a form of CSR. Okay, that's the whole point. Okay, so that's an example. Here's another example from Mitsubishi, promoting proactive investor relations. Okay, this is another form of policy with shareholders and investors. Okay, so the corporate administrative division and corporate finance division are responsible for keeping lines of communication open with shareholders and investors. Incorporate the opinions of the shareholder and investors and the results of dialogue with them into our management plans and practices. Okay, so they're trying to ensure here through their policies that the views of the shareholders and the investors will be taken into account when they develop their policies, right? And that they will maintain these open lines of communication. So if shareholders have complaints about what the company's doing or the way the company's doing things, that they will be allowed and they will have an outlet for voicing their complaints. Okay, so this is part of their policy and how they maintain these good relations with their investors. Okay, this is part of CSR. And then responsibility towards employees. Okay, so some of the ways is to provide healthy working environment, regular and fair wages, provide welfare services, okay, provide training and promotion facilities, provide reasonable working standards and norms, to provide a mechanism to address workers' grievances. Okay, so when workers have complaints, right, or they find that their employer is doing something that's unethical to them, forcing them to work really long hours, or the conditions that they're working in are really bad or something, that there's a mechanism, a way that they can voice their complaints. And then, of course, proper recognition of their work, right? So that they are being acknowledged for their work. Okay, so here Gamuda's policies towards work-life integration is an example here of another Malaysian company. To ensure greater personal satisfaction and effectiveness, we designed a suite of flexible work arrangements and benefits to suit different individual needs. So Gamuda offers flexi wellness, whatever that means, we don't know. It's some kind of plan to promote worker wellness. Flexi work arrangement, okay, so that probably has something to do with working from home, and flexible working hours, flexi retirement plans. Okay, so they may have a different, a variety of different types of retirement plans for their employees. Okay, so they're trying to ensure this kind of healthy work environment for their employees, and this is part of their policy as a company. Okay, and this is part of the CSR program that they have. Okay. In addition, they have staff. Oh, sorry, this is a different company. This is IJM Land. Okay, so IJM Land is another company. They have, again, their own staff welfare programs, employee protection, assistance to purchase residential property, okay, academic excellence awards. Okay, so these are some additional examples of types of CSR. Okay, so this is probably some sort of insurance program. Okay, employee protection. Usually they have maybe health insurance or something, life insurance perhaps. They give assistance to purchase property. So maybe there's some kind of loan program, or of some low interest loan program probably. And then they give scholarships of some kind or awards related to academic performance. Okay, so again, these are additional examples of CSR in terms of employee, meeting the needs of employees, being responsible to employees. And then last is the responsibility towards the customer. Okay, so supplying socially harmless products. Okay, again, being socially conscious about what they're doing, all right, and the kind of products they're producing. Supplying the quality standards as promised, so quality standards, adopting fair pricing, providing after-sales service, resisting black market and profiteering. Okay, so avoiding illegal forms of selling, maintaining grievances, consumers' grievances cell. Okay, so this is again an outlet for grievances that customers might have. and then ensuring fair competition so that they're not being bullies in the market, for example. Sorry. All right, so this is the responsibility towards the customer. Let's see what we got here. Acer has an online education and training for employees and partners. Okay, now this sounds more like employee responsibility rather than customer responsibility. Online learning system. Okay, so Acer has the E-Academy. Provide professional knowledge training for new products, resolution of common product queries, and customer coping skills. Now, this is for the customer. That's for the customer. And standard processes to first-line customer service employees and operating unit employees, including an online evaluation after the course is finished activities. So it's actually voted for both employees as well as customers. But it's actually, no, this is geared more towards employees. More towards employees. Okay, so this would be an example of employee responsibility, okay, CSR and the for employees rather than customers. Let's see if we got one here for customers. Okay, here we go. So Subway and their commitment to the nutritional quality of their ingredients. Now this is fun. This is kind of funny because Subway has been in the news recently. Does anybody know what is happening with Subway recently? And it's very much related to this topic of CSR. Siapa tahu? No, you don't know. Well, they've been accused, in the US at least, they've been accused of their tuna is apparently not tuna. So when you buy a tuna sub at Subway, there's been a lawsuit filed against them claiming that there's actually very little tuna fish in the tuna in Subway. And so this is the big controversy right now with Subway. It's the quality of their products, of the ingredients of their products. So here we talk about nutritional quality. That's exactly what they're talking about. That's what the lawsuit is about. All right. Now Subway has this, as you can see here, they have this policy statement guarantee to their customers. Follows the latest nutrition research and recommendations to satisfy the evolving dietary priorities of customers and improve the nutritional quality of their ingredients throughout the world. Okay. And so they mentioned here they've removed all the artificial trans fats from their products. They've added important nutrients and reduced sodium. Okay, so this is just an example of how a company can do CSR towards its customers. And in this case, it's ensuring, or at least pledging or claiming that their products are of high quality. Okay, so there's some sort of quality guarantee. And that is one of the examples of customer CSR. Okay. And that takes us to the end of our lecture on CSR, corporate social responsibility. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Well, oh yeah, sorry, Hadi, go ahead.
From me, no, Prof.
Oh, no, okay. All right, thanks. All right, so yeah, so the last two lectures, this one on corporate social responsibility, last week's on globalization. You may come across a question or two on the final exam. So just go through the lectures again and the materials. And I also did put up that there's a paper on globalization that I also posted last week in Pujablast that you can also read through to get a better idea, a more in-depth understanding of globalization, especially from the Malaysian perspective. Okay, so that's another additional resource for you. All right, so that it's hard to believe it. That wraps up our semester, week 14. Can't believe it. So I guess at this point, I just want to thank everyone. I've enjoyed the semester as much as we can, given the circumstances. I know it's difficult. The situation that we're in is difficult. I know it's hard in terms of learning. It's hard in terms of interacting with each other. And I know it definitely takes away from the learning experience, having to do everything online. But I've enjoyed my classes with you guys and wish you all the best, both in this class and then in your other courses. and in your future. And I really hope that we can see each other again on campus soon, inshallah. Let's all pray hard for that. That's it. If you have anything else, at any time, you can always WhatsApp me. You can always contact me. Okay. If there's anything that comes up while you're studying or whatever. All right. So thanks very much, guys. All the best to you, and inshallah jumpa lagi on the 12th of July. Okay. So if there's nothing else, we will see you again on the 12th. Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. Nice seeing everyone. Although I just see most of you, I just see your names, but.
Thank you, Prof.
Sama.
Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome, Sama. Okay. Take care, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam,
Thank you,
Prof. Thank
Prof.
you. Thank you very much,
Bye.
Prof.
Jumpa lagi.
Thank
Have a
you,
nice
Prof.
day.
Bye.